Okay, so we've talked about many different levels of representation already. We've talked about the sounds of language. We've talked about words. We've talked about morphemes. But the real power of language does not actually lie in any of those levels of representation. Language is not a super powerful system for expressing our thoughts because we have all these great words, but rather the reason it's so powerful is because we have some kind of a mechanism that allows us to arrange these words into larger expressions in such a way that we can actually express basically an infinitude of different meanings by combining words into bigger expressions. So how do our brains do that? That's the really fascinating question. So this is a headline from The Onion, which if you haven't actually read that specific issue of The Onion, you probably haven't encountered that sentence before. It has kind of a funny meaning. And this example makes it very clear that the way we interpret language is not by taking this string of words and kind of figuring out like, okay, what would be the most plausible meaning that these words together could yield? Because of course you wouldn't get this very funny meaning out of these words if that was the case. So the way that we interpret sentences does not seem to be figuring out the kind of best fit with our real world knowledge given the particular array of lexical items. Instead, what our brains do is they use your grammatical knowledge of the syntax of your language in order to combine the words together, and then that syntactic structure gets interpreted. And now I'm just talking about this purely in sort of theoretical cognitive terms. We're not yet saying anything about how the brain does this kind of a process. We'll get to that later. So the reason that we are able to communicate is because we both, so the speaker and the or the language producer and the language comprehender, they converge on the same syntactic structure for that expression. So here's kind of a Ling 101 structure for this particular expression. And that syntactic structure is then semantically interpreted. So the structure gives you the right semantic structure as well. And in theoretical linguistics, we have a lot of elaborate theories about exactly how the combinatory semantic system works. I'm not going to teach those theories here now. I just want to give you a bit of an awareness that such theories exist. But we think that semantic interpretation proceeds compositionally. So node by node, we put meanings together in such a way that the meaning of the whole is sort of transparently predictable from the meanings of the parts. So the meanings of the words and the syntax give you a pretty good idea what the meaning of the whole will be. So let's just look at that very informally. Put my formal example away. So here we have a verb phrase leaves house. So there obviously the meaning of a house and the activity of leaving combined together. We have a prepositional phrase without face. And so there you obviously combine the kind of negative meaning of without with the meaning of face. You put these together in order to get a bigger meaning where there's some kind of a leaving from the house without a face activity and so forth. Here's another adverb that adds a sort of accidental meaning. And so here's how we can kind of conceive of compositional semantic interpretation. So now, once you have interpreted this expression, then you can realize that it does not actually match with your knowledge of the world very well. So it's a very implausible situation. And we all kind of converge on that same representation. And that's why the sentence is funny and makes it to The Onion. Words combine syntactically. We have semantic knowledge. And finally, we have our world knowledge, so our knowledge about the world. So we're very unlikely to produce sentences that are completely implausible given our world knowledge. But crucially, you can't really evaluate the fit of the meaning with your world knowledge unless you've actually composed the meaning. So let's think about those three different types of knowledge a little bit further with another example. So here I have two transitive verbs, like and guess. So they're syntactically similar in that they both can combine with a noun phrase object. And they are semantically also a little bit similar since they describe something that happens in the brain. They're so-called mental verbs. Okay, so imagine a situation in which I'm just coming back from vacation. And I'm telling you a bunch of stuff about the vacation. So here are some sentences that use like that are all syntactically fine, semantically fine, and fine given our world knowledge. So you won't think I'm a crazy person talking, okay? So I could say that I like the location of the vacation. I like the price of the vacation. I like the chef at the hotel. I like the gift shop. I like the pool. Okay, so that's some totally mundane, fine sentences. Okay, so then let's use the verb guess. So I need to change the situation a little bit. So let's now imagine that I'm coming back from vacation, and I'm showing my mom the pictures from the vacation, and she's like, just on the basis of the picture, she's guessing a bunch of stuff about the vacation. So I might then report to you, my mom guessed the location. Okay, so that would be fine, just on the basis of the picture, she guessed the location. My mom guessed the price, totally fine. So again, I'm just using the verb guessed instead of liked here. But now something a little odder is starting to happen. My mom guessed the chef, a little harder to interpret. How about the next one? My mom guessed the gift shop. Even worse, like this now is a very unlikely sentence that I would use. My mom guessed the pool. Equally, there's just something a little off about this sentence. So here I've labeled the set of examples as syntax being fine and world knowledge being fine. But what I'm varying is the semantic properties of these expressions. So the first two examples are totally fine, but then it kind of something starts to go wrong. So what's going on? So here, what we see is that syntactically, both guess and like can take a noun phrase as their direct object. So that's clear because I can say, I like the location. My mom guessed the location. They have that shared syntactic property. However, semantically, the meaning of the direct object of guess actually needs to be easily convertible to a question meaning. Okay, so this should be kind of intuitive now. So if we, for example, try to paraphrase the first two good examples, the meaning is something like, my mom guessed what the location of the vacation was, and my mom guessed what the price of the vacation was. And now with that formula, the next sentence becomes harder to make sense of. So my mom guessed what the chef of the vacation was. In order for us to kind of find that sentence okay, we want to imagine a situation where there's some set of chefs that we both are aware of, and of those chefs, my mom figured out the right mapping from one individual chef to the vacation. And similarly for gift shop, pool, they just don't lend themselves to a similar kind of question conversion in the way that the first two nouns, location and price, do. So some nouns make better direct objects for guess than others, and it seems to depend on their ability to kind of hide this type of a question meaning. So we call these nouns in this kind of construction actually concealed questions. And there's a bunch of verbs that behave this way. So they can take a noun phrase, but really they kind of like convert the noun phrase into a question, like, estimate, decide, verbs like that. And we have hypotheses about exactly what property of the noun makes it easily convertible to a question meaning, and they tend to be nouns that have so-called relational meanings, and there's a literature on that. So what I'm highlighting here is that in this case, what we're varying is the kind of logical semantic properties of the expressions, not really your world knowledge or your syntactic knowledge. And so that's a type of knowledge that we have about our language that's distinct from the other two. So we, of course, can also make the syntax bad. So that's sort of easy. So here I'm basically giving you sentences that are perfectly plausible, world knowledge and semantics wise, but syntactically they're bad. So I arrived at the location. If you arrive at a location, you can't say I arrived at the location. I fainted the price, not a good sentence, even if you fainted at the price. I blushed the chef, really tough too. So you can blush at the chef, I guess. I stood the gift shop, not good. If you stood in the gift shop, you can't, that doesn't work as a description of that. I floated the pool, not a good description of a situation where you floated in the pool. So here, so these verbs are kind of stubbornly intransitive and will not take a direct object, even if like semantically it seems like it would be okay. And then finally, we can create syntactically totally okay sentences and semantically totally okay sentences in that you can compose the meaning without any problem, but then the meaning that you get just does not fit your world knowledge. So I ate the location. I mean, we know what that would mean, but just doesn't fit your world knowledge. I squeezed the price. I watered the chef. I dropped the gift shop. I sliced the pool. We can all imagine these situations, which means that your semantic combinatory system went ahead and constructed that meaning, but the resulting meaning is just a little odd given what you know about the world. So here, let's just recap what we learned from these. So in the first example, everything's going great. Syntax semantics world, good. In the second set of examples, syntax is fine, but the semantic type is not always right. It's not an issue with your world knowledge. In the third set, these could make perfect sense, but these verbs are just intransitive. And finally, we just have a bunch of descriptions of situations that's just not likely in the world. And so now when we actually talk about the cognitive neuroscience literature, I want us to be really clear about these three different types of knowledge. And the distinctions are not always super sharply drawn in the literature. And so that's why I'm highlighting them here. Okay, so next, I want to introduce you to three bodies of research in the cognitive neuroscience of combinatory syntax and semantics. And so these are sort of the main bodies of research if we kind of look across the full literature, broadly speaking. And so the first body of work that we'll talk about is a body of work where you're violating some type of knowledge that your brain has about these different levels of representation. So we're always surprising the brain in these studies. So it's a body of violation studies where the comprehension of expressions is investigated that violates the knowledge of how words should combine together. And it is going to be primarily an EG literature. Secondly, we're going to talk about a body of work that is focused on a specific brain area, specifically Broca's area. So you remember from the classic model of language and the brain, this is going to be a primarily hemodynamic body of work that is interested in the role of Broca's area in syntax. And so this is a long debate about whether and how Broca's area contributes to syntactic processing. And then finally, we'll talk about a newer body of research where we're really focusing on the very basic operation of putting two words together into a larger structure. Of course, more than 2 words as well, but a lot of this research has focused on very minimal basic composition. So we'll be asking the question, what neural activity reflects the basic operation of composing elements together into larger expressions? And so we'll be starting with the violation study.